Hi, everyone. Welcome to KPIC's inaugural Ask an Immigration Expert. We've got something new for you. We're taking questions from KPIC's form solutions, wherein we're going to answer them a bit more in depth. We're going to offer you some law, practical information. We're going to do that in two formats. We're going to do that by video podcast, and we're going to do that with written columns. Today, in our first session, we have with us Kim Lee. Hi, Kim.
Hey.
Kim is based in London, Ontario. She is an immigration practitioner, a regulated Canadian immigration consultant with more than 20 years in practice. The name of her firm is Borders Immigration Consultancy. Thank you, Kim. My name is Monica O'Brien. I am KPIC's Education Manager. I am also an RCIC. Today, we're going to have a conversation about LMIAs. So, Kim, I'm going to read first the brief question that comes from the form, and then follow up with some questions to you, and hopefully we'll provide some perspective back to the original question writer, and also for those who are watching today, so that they'll get some perspective and information and a little bit of perspective going forward on the particular topic. Any questions, Kim?
Okay. No, I'm good. Ready when you are.
Thank you for the submission of this question as well. The question is, I have a high-wage LMIA in process in the Greater Toronto Area in Toronto. The ads have been posted more than 30 days on 4 particular job sites. That's Career Owl, allstarsjob.ca, Indeed.ca, and the Job Bank. These are all free ads. Do the ads need to be paid for? So, Kim, that question is for you. Do these ads need to be paid for?
No, there's nothing in the program requirements nor the policies or directives that ask for paid advertising. When we do recruitment and when we're looking at advertisements, we are looking more not necessarily whether or not there had to be a paid service, but more of whether or not it is a source that could be relied upon, and also whether or not it's a credible source where you can genuinely, Canadians looking to find jobs can genuinely go on that job board to look for the position. So you don't need to go to Workopolis or Monster or any of those things that you have to pay. I personally prefer to if my clients are able to, and I only post it for 4 weeks anyways, because it does add an element of whether or not the employer made a bona fide effort in locating a qualified worker. And I say this when I premise it around the understanding that yes, we know that we're trying to help the foreign worker achieve this LMIA or this employer achieve the LMIA to hire this foreign worker, but you have to take the position as if you are the Service Canada officer, and if you were truly indeed an employer looking to fill this position. Where would you normally post this position? Because that's the perspective the officer is going to be looking at. Is if you were a genuine employer, you were an employer with a genuine job offer and you're looking for qualified people, where would you go to find these qualified Canadians? You wouldn't be going to, abc.com, no, not even ABC, but xyzjobs.com where no one knows about it to post the job, because clearly you're not going to be able to find the people you're looking for. This goes to also the same rationality as to why Service Canada says the corporate websites are never acceptable. So big company websites are not acceptable as a published source, because the rationale behind that is if you were an applicant looking for a job, how would you know to look at that company website for a particular position if you didn't know that there was a vacancy?
So even if Ford Canada has a career section and they've got 10 job vacancies, that would not count as a credible source to Service Canada?
Nope. Even if it was GM or Ford or Chrysler or any of the big companies, even Amazon, if I want to use that, Lululemon was one where they could not use their own company website. I mean, the argument has always been, well, look, if my company is big enough, clearly if someone wants to come and work for my company, they would then go onto my company website to look for the position. But you have to keep in mind the spirit as to why these advertisements are being posted. The point is, it's a test of the labor market to ensure that there are no ready, willing, and able Canadian citizens and or permanent residents to take on the position. So you think about this and you think, okay, if I were a Canadian and I were looking for a job, I would be going to sources that I know for sure are posting jobs.
So as you stated, like you've got some of them that do charge a fee and they're credible, but I think some of the ones that this person has asked may be credible sources, so this is, yeah.
So what will frame whether or not it's a credible source will depend upon whether we're dealing with high wage, low wage. Okay, so this is a high wage position. One of the requirements, if you take a look at the advertising requirements, it says you have to post 3 job postings. 1 is the job bank, 2 is an external source, and they give you a whole list of those sources. But of the 2, 1 has to be national in scope. So if the 3 that were picked, Career Owls, All Jobs, Indeed, and Job Bank, of the 3 externals, if 1 of them are national in scope, theoretically, you've met the requirement. Right? So Indeed is definitely one that I've used before. All Star Jobs I've used as well. Career Owl, not so much. But you know, at the end of the day, it comes down to also whether or not it's common to the employer's practice. Because remember, when you're arguing with the Service Canada, they're going to say, why did you use careerowls.com? I've successfully argued why Kijiji is a good source for certain positions, whereas in some cases, Kijiji may not be acceptable if I was posting for a high executive job position, for example, right? So it's all subject to how you argue it as well.
So, and I guess that comes back to, we often see questions, can I place my ads on Kijiji? So would you say it really depends on the scope of the job and if that's common practice for that employer or that field?
Absolutely. So say, for example, I'll give an example of roofers. For my roofers, they're all low-wage positions, right? I'm not going to post it on Indeed.com because I'm not going to, my roofers will never go on to, if I were a roofer, if that was my profession, I wouldn't go to Indeed.com to look for a position. I would be looking at publications such as Kijiji, or it could be, you know, whatever, it could be a local newspaper. That could be a source. It all depends on what my position is and where I think the majority of my population of applicants will be.
So would you say when you're talking to employers, you would recommend at least one paid source advertisement?
No, I wouldn't recommend one paid source. I would first ask them, where do you normally post? And then I would, you know, mostly it would be Indeed.com or again, All Stars, or it could be Night Hunter is one. But if it's premised around the position. If it's a high wage position, it's an executive position, I would say go to Workopolis and Monster. But then it can also be, for example, my chef. I would not go to Indeed. I wouldn't go to Monster or Workopolis, but instead I might go to an industry-related publication. So hospitality, somewhere, you know, H Careers, I believe, is one that's hospitality, geared towards the hospitality industry. It's industry specific. So obviously, if I'm going there to post a job, all my chefs are going to be going there to look for a job. So I could justify that.
Okay, so it all flows from the job, the level of job, and the practice for the employer and the industry. Okay, so that segues nicely into our next question, which you already commented on. And the question I have is, could you briefly talk about the advertising requirements for LMIAs? And you spoke about the high wage. So do you want to just repeat that and then we can talk about low wage?
So we're not talking about the content of the actual advertisement, right? Because there's 7. There's 7 that we know that are mandatory requirements in the content of a posting. But if we're talking about sources, high wage, right, there is a distinction between high wage, low wage. High wage, okay, both streams, whether high wage or low wage, has 3 publications that must be used. It's the targeted audience that will provide you with the distinction between high wage, low wage. High wage would be 1 job bank, 2 external. Of the 2 external, 1 has to be national in scope.
Right.
Okay. Under low wage, it's 3 publications, 1 job bank, 2 externals. Each of the 2, each one has to target one of the underrepresented groups. So you've got the 2 externals, 1 has to target 1 group, and then the other external has to target the other group, which would be your new immigrants, your Indigenous people, I believe vulnerable youth, and I think it is persons with disabilities, I believe. So you have to target, of the 2, you have to target 2 of the 4.
And that is in regards to low wage.
Low wage.
You spoke briefly about the content. So not to put you on the spot, but tell me the 7 points in as briefly as you can, succinctly as you can.
Sure. So in the mandatory content, what's most important is going to be obviously the position, the job description, the minimum requirements, the work location, the wage, the hours, the language, Those are your 7. So the work language has to be it, right? It has to say English or French.
Right.
Okay, so do you have any else that you want to say in regard to that content?
No, I mean, this is something that, you know, when I draft contents with employers, I always go to the employers first to give me the content of the position they're looking to fill. Part of my role is to ensure that it fits into a particular NOC, because the NOC will dictate the median, which is what we're going to be talking on when we get to that part. The NOC is going to be really important as well, because Service Canada officers do try to catch you on a technicality when you've got the wrong NOC assignment, because they, and most people do this, or some people do this, Service Canada has a hunch that when you put it in a particular NOC, it's because you're hoping to get a lower median wage in order to satisfy the position.
Ah, I see. So that bodes well into our next question. Can you tell me or tell the audience, what is the median wage and what role does that play in terms of the advertising?
So median wage is a wage that must be offered in an LMIA. It doesn't matter what the company pays their other people in the same position, in the same occupation. It doesn't matter what the industry pays for that position. The job bank dictates the median wage. And this is why it's important. It's very important that you get the NOC assignment right the first time. Because once you get that NOC, it will dictate the median wage, and that is the wage the employer must be willing to offer and must be willing to post for the position that's being offered.
So what if they offered a wage that was below the median wage?
The application will absolutely be refused.
And what if you offered a wage that was above the median wage?
Above the median wage is fine. Let me retract on the one where it says if you offer below median. It will be refused unless if you are able to challenge it. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to put a word of caution here, okay? With regard to wage challenges, even if you have the best information and you perform your own wage survey, we have to keep in mind that Service Canada officers do not have regulation or guidelines or any type of law that dictates how they must assess an application, not necessarily assess, or how they must adjudicate and come to a decision on an application. And so when you do a wage challenge to try to overcome a median wage where the wage is lower, it's an uphill battle, even if you have a lot of information to convince an officer otherwise. So you are still left at the mercy of the officer. It's whether or not you and the employer is willing to take that chance after 4 weeks of recruitment on whether or not you want to put in that wage and then try to justify why you're paying below median. I will tell you that you might actually get to the point where you have to take it to federal court in order to get an actual decision on whether or not it was reasonable to offer a wage that's below median, okay? So we always take the path with the least resistance, and as long as the employer is okay with it and it's able to be justified, then obviously median is the easiest way to go. To answer the question on whether or not you can pay above, absolutely you can pay above median. There's nothing that says that you can't.
So, and I guess the whole concept of the wage challenge, the median wage challenge, is a whole other podcast, I think, or column.
It is, absolutely.
What kinds of errors or mistakes do you think are made in terms of the advertising process that could impact approval or refusal of an LMIA?
So very, very minor details. Okay, so you know, they say that the devil's in the devil's in the details. It's all about the details. So where most people will get refusal is the publication date of the advertisement. So we always have to keep in mind the postings have to run for 30 days. The application must be filed within the 90 days of that posting running, okay? So we've had situations where employers would miss it by 1 day. So they were on the 91st day of the ad having been run, and then they stop it, right? So they run it for the 4 weeks, and then they wait 91 days and they file the application. The application can be refused. So little technical errors. Another one could be the failure to provide the location of the work. Now, there is a court challenge on that, in that sometimes there is case law on that where there was a company that did not indicate the exact street location or exact location of where the company was or the work was going to be, but rather they had used a huge monument or some type of an area in that small little town that everyone knew where that work location was, and that's the only reason why they were able to win the case. So it's really important that work location is indicated. In caregiver type of applications, you would never provide the private home of a private household, but you could provide an intersection of where it's located, right? And then, of course, work language. That's one that's always missed.
in terms of language, you have to indicate French or English. You can't say this job, the intended worker must work in Croatian.
Well, they could, but then you have to establish business necessity. So if the business requires that individual to speak that language, then there needs to be a business necessity argument. In other words, the company needs that language in order to survive, and it is part of the role. But those ones are tough. Those are tough, complex ones. But as long as it's honest and as long as it's not created just for the foreign worker, then there should be no reason that you wouldn't be able to win that one.
So would you recommend employers keep their ads running for the duration of the LMIA?
Good point, because in the LMIA process, there needs to be at least one active running. So of the three, one needs to be actively running throughout the whole entire application up until the time you receive a decision. So the one that I always advise my employers to keep posted and keep active is the job bank, because it's free. Now, the only caveat I have to that with the job bank is after 120 days, you reach the max. So you can extend it for 30 days, but when you get to 120 days, that posting then becomes obsolete. You cannot renew it anymore. So you then have to teach the employer to have the insight that at 115 days, they have to go in and create a duplicate posting so that there's an overlap, there's no gap, right? Now, one of the things that's the nightmare with creating a duplicate position is the employers do end up having to contact the job bank NHQ to explain why there's a duplicate posting, because the job bank restricts it to only one posting, one job. When you have two of the identical positions, they end up canceling one, and sometimes they do it in error because they don't want to show that duplicate role or the duplicate posting.
So I guess the key advice here is to make sure you stay on top of your job bank ads. Kim, you've provided a lot of clarity on the advertising process and giving us some clear distinctions. I wonder if you have any final comments or tips, maybe just about the over LMIA process without getting into a lot of detail, maybe the one or two things that you might want to tell others who are tackling this process.
Sure, absolutely. So LMIAs are a very complex beast. We read the requirements, we read the program requirements on the HRSDC or the ESDC website, and it provides us with a lot of information. And one always seems to think, as long as I follow the instructions carefully, that I'm going to be able to make sure that the application is done properly. But it's not as simple as just meeting the requirements on the website. There are many different nuances that you have to understand to provide a distinction between low wage, high wage, median wage, when it is that you have to offer a high wage, when it is that you need to ensure that the issue of unduly restrictiveness on the position hasn't been erroneously applied by the employer. And so there are a lot of little complexities that really it's over time that you gain this experience, and it's over time that it's being exposed to LMIAs where you actually get to that level. So, my strongest takeaway for anyone is if you're starting out on LMIAs, it is, for me, I love LMIAs. I know everyone hates them. I love them only because I enjoy the challenges that comes with it. But with that, there are definitely complexities that every single RCIC that's never done one or is looking to get into one should always work with someone that actually knows how to do one, because it's not as simple as it seems.
And briefly before we came on camera, we were talking about whether is this an employer-driven process or a consultant-driven process, and you had some interesting comments on that. So maybe you want to repeat them for the camera.
Okay, so one of the things, and I get this too, is when I get new employers that call me, they say, look, I'm going to pay you to do whatever it is to get this foreign worker for me. I don't want to have anything to do with the application. Just tell me what I'm supposed to say. I'll sign on the dotted line, and then we can file the application. The LMIA is an employer-driven initiative. Okay, so it is something that you must, even though us as practitioners know what it is that we're supposed to be doing, know how it is that we should premise our certain questions or answers so that we know what it is that the officer is looking for, it should always be an employer-involved type of process, because at the end of the day, it's the employer that's going to be hiring the foreign worker. It is the employer that has to speak to the job offer. And during the phone conversation with Service Canada, whether or not the job is a genuine one is going to be based on how the employer is going to answer the officer's questions. And they can pick all this up. They can pick it up during the interview call on whether it was an application that was prepared by the by the RCIC or by the employer. In fact, one of the questions that's asked by Service Canada in some of the interviews that I've attended is, did you complete this yourself, or what is your third party's role in this whole application? It even goes down to, did you do the recruitment yourself, and what is the role of the third party during the recruitment process? So these are things that your employers must be able to answer honestly, and the only way to have them answer honestly is to have them involved in the process. You can guide. You can definitely be there to guide. You can definitely be there to premise certain things for them so that they understand why you have to answer a certain way. But you definitely it should be driven by them, and you're just sitting as a passenger to help them along.
Well, I love the analogy that we're there to guide and assist, and we're all in it together. So, Kim, I want to thank you for your time today, and we will definitely have you back sometime in the future. Thanks, Kim.
Awesome. Thank you.